YouTube real quick. Hi, everyone that's live on YouTube. Welcome to our book study with Francis Lucille's Perfume of Silence. We're on chapter 10, The Objects Flow Through Us. We'll bring everyone in the room and welcome everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our book study. It doesn't, for some reason on this computer, it's not giving the feedback on YouTube like it has in the past. So I'm happy about that. It's good to see all of you again today. Thanks for being here. And as I was telling the YouTube audience, we're on chapter 10, Objects Flow Through Us. Welcome, Jenny. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Bill. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you all.
Yeah, Jenny, I was looking at this chapter. At this, the first, halfway through this chapter 10. And this is, this has a little bit different flavor than previous chapters. This almost feels like this is a psychological laboratory.
Yes. He's and he also goes into this concept of the witness as well, and the observer of what we call the observer, really not being an object of perception rather than consciousness itself. So it's a very deep chapter, this one.
I like the first question is a long question. The questioner says, I felt frustrated, and it's really talking about most of us have this experience, at least sometimes, or at least in the beginning. I felt frustrated this morning because my young son wouldn't settle. I was tangled in a knot of frustration. Then I found myself watching the irritations and frustration. I suddenly came across a peacefulness, watching the frustration come and go. Later, I heard your words, just drop it. At that moment, I didn't know who would do the dropping, what dropping could ever mean, or who the dropper was. And I think that's a really conscious kind of a contemplation. I like the way the question is presented, and I liked it. It felt very common to my own experience what the questioner was asking Francis.
Yes, and really, in a way, the questioner was getting stuck with the words that Francis had previously said in order to overcome a previous block when she, I imagine it might be a she, had already got past that point. And Francis explains that, well, there is no dropper. Dropper happens automatically with understanding, and she knows that because she's already experienced that. And he uses this analogy of digging for water in the desert, that once we understand it's a desert and there's no water there, then we stop digging.
Yeah. And also, it's an awakened. I am calling it. It's an awakened mind. It's a mind that that has an understanding that would be able to formulate a question of this type.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the next question is really a follow-on from that, isn't it? Where she says, in my experience, welcoming doesn't happen without an intention. And if there's an intention, then it isn't really welcoming. and the thoughts and the feelings just crowd in. And I think that relates to that first question, and it sounds like a kind of catch-22, and it's this is such a common dilemma. There's a more specific it's a more specific form of questions, such as, how can I escape from the clutches of a separate self when there is no separate self to escape from? Or how can I become enlightened or self-realized or happy when there's no doer and therefore nothing I can do? And the answer to all questions of that type is going to be the same. The fact that you ask the question implies that you already have at least some glimmer of understanding, i.e. the understanding that intentional welcoming is not true welcoming, that there is no separate self to escape from, and that there is no doer that can do anything. And so he's explaining that what's happened is that the mind has created a formulation of that understanding, that formulation traps you and offers you no means of escape, but just seeing the trap for what it is in itself is escape from that trap.
Yeah, I mean, these kinds of questions can only come from someone that is fairly studied in these ideas.
Yes, she's gone into this deeply, hasn't she? It's obvious, and she's trying very hard to make it real in her life, in her ordinary everyday life, which is lovely. And so he says, don't judge yourself. There's nobody to be judged. See the intention for what it is. And the moment we see that there's no welcoming, then we're already in welcoming. It's only welcoming that enables us to see this situation, and this seeing is enough. Trust it. You don't need to do anything about it. Don't create a doer who wants to do something.
Yes. And this is where, and this is what the mind loves to do. If it can't make something real from this other place, from this place of ignorance, it will make something real. It'll build a story, or build layers of ideas that will be spiritual, and it'll build it up as another thing over here.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So he said, don't build up layers of intention. See the mechanism. And I think that's probably the most important idea that is offered here, is see the mechanism that occurs. Just see the mechanism is the seer, and initially we find a little bit of understanding as the watcher or as the observer, but going back a little further to the seer is using or actually seeing the mechanism.
Yes. It's understanding, and and once we're in understanding, then we are effectively standing as consciousness. Understanding comes from stand under, and we're standing under consciousness itself. That's what underpins consciousness.
I'm reminded by, this is so funny because I learned this welcoming from Rupert at a retreat in Garrison. And this welcoming was like, it was new to me because I was, up to that point, I was of the neti camp. I was of the negation of experience to identify my primary position, and I wasn't in the welcoming understanding yet. And it was from that one of those retreats that I learned this, and I can see from this content that Rupert must have learned it from Francis.
I think Rupert learned everything he learned from Francis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And when I was at the retreat, my wife Lisa had been going through something physical, very physical, and I was on a break. I was calling her on Zoom or Skype or something at the break, and she was talking about this physical experience that she was having. And I said, "Well, can you come to a place where you just welcome it, where not just accept it, but you welcome it and be good with it from now on until for as long as the body is around. Welcome it with total love and welcoming." And that's a little bit different than accepting.
Yes, it is different. Yes.
And when I had that conversation with her, all of a sudden her eyes, I mean, I wasn't with her, we were on Zoom, but her actually I guess maybe I was with her because I was on Zoom, but she opened up, and it was an awakening experience for Lisa that never went away. It never changed. It was like a oh my God moment. That
Yes.
welcoming is a game changer.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And also not just welcoming, but because the welcoming is a word that we use that says everything is fine as it is.
Yes. Yes.
And not just fine, but everything is welcomed. Come, more, more.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So it's an interesting idea. And if anyone has any comments or any questions on any of this content, please use the raise your hand function, and we'll start to take questions either in the raise your hand, or you can raise your hand like this, or you can put it in the chat. If you put it in the chat, it will probably be at the lower level on the noticing poll. But you're welcome to jump in any time you feel like it. So going from where Francis gives this questioner the suggestion, don't judge yourself, and this would be for all of us, don't judge yourself. There is nobody to be judged. See the intention for what it is. The moment that we see that there is no welcoming, we are ready in welcoming. So it is a kind of a catch-22 again. It's a paradox. It's like the welcoming or the agreement to welcome acknowledges welcoming.
Yes. It's all about understanding, and that's effortless. It never takes effort to understand. And that's really of the nature of this real welcoming. If we have an intention to welcome, we try to welcome, then that's as this questioner realized, that's not it. It's this complete effortlessness.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really a great understanding to have, and I appreciate that this is a very mature being, a questioner that would have this kind of a question. I think it would be most helpful for all of us. Francis says, don't create a doer who wants to do something, who wants to improve the welcoming, who is not happy with the way the welcoming is happening or not happening. You have understood that intention is the major obstacle to welcoming. Let this understanding work for you. Don't work for it. And I have heard many, many times, I've heard, in a spiritual kind of evolution, we use these words of intention to set an intention, to set a goal, to set a desire. And that might be helpful um, in the early days, but it's not helpful if you're living a life of being, of effortless being.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Is there anything else in that before we move on to the next question?
No, let's move on to the next question. This is a different subject, really, isn't it?
Yes.
So it says, I watch perceptions, thoughts, and sensations fade at night. They clearly vanish into me, so the real I obviously does not sleep. I resolve to watch the reverse in the morning, but at that time it's not so certain that they come out of me because I seem to wake up in a ready-made world. Can you say more about that? And Francis encourages that question and not to theorize about the experience, just to notice it. He says it's important to eliminate the theoretician and to stick to the experiment or the feeling and the sensation. And in some teachings, the observer is equated with the real I, but the observer vanishes during the transition from waking to sleeping, and also at other times in the gaps between thoughts and perceptions, which we've discussed in previous webinars, or for that matter in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which we talked about last time. But as Francis points out, when we notice the presence of the observer, we can welcome it completely and watch its disappearance, like watching a sunset. That which remains is our true nature. The observer cannot be aware of this because the observer is itself perceived. It is a thought, an impersonator, which doesn't observe anything. It is observed.
Yes. Yeah, and this is an important distinction. A lot of people that are new to to inquiry, to self-inquiry, to the idea of non-duality, they will first go to the observer because
Yes.
that can be a step that helps people to recognize that they are not the object.
It's
So
a very useful first step, and it's really what the neti process is about, isn't it?
yes, yes,
Yeah. Mm.
yeah, and then it goes back to what Francis said in the previous context, where he says, "See the mechanism,"
Yes.
and because the mechanism is really isness. The mechanism, or actually, it's not even the mechanism wouldn't be isness. The mechanism is almost like the activity of seeing.
Yes, it's the mechanism in a way is how the mind interprets what has been seen.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, so we need to go back to that raw experience and not try to create lots of theories about it.
yeah. And this next paragraph is one of the few times that I noticed that Francis. Now you can correct me, please, if this is off, but this is one of the few times where Francis actually talks about his own experience. He says, in
Yes,
my case, when the theoretician, did I say that right?
theoretician. Yes,
The
tricky
theoretician
word, that one.
became aware that I was awake all the time and that I was the witness of these transitions between states, I realized by the same token that it had actually been like this for years. I just hadn't been able to formulate it at the level of mind, nor had the mind been struck by this knowledge, because it goes on beyond the mind. And this is Francis speaking of his own experience.
yes, but it's something that we can all experience. And he recommends going to sleep at night from a position of disidentification with the objects of mind, body, or world. And he says that when we wake up, that same state of meditation is present, and the objects, including the I feeling, will reappear. But he says they no longer have any hypnotic power over us. And I mean, that's something we can all try. It does seem to work. It certainly, it worked for me. I used to I mean I used to do that before going to sleep, just to allow the sinking back into my true nature, where I went to sleep, as a way of going to sleep. But then when I woke up, I used to deliberately make sure that I went back to the understanding, when the objects came in, that all the objects are inside me. So it wasn't little me waking up into a huge, great world. And I would make sure that was established, that was properly established, before I got out of bed and put my foot on the carpet. And you do that, you use that approach for a while, and eventually it just becomes automatic. You don't need to go through that process again. It happens automatically.
Yes, yes.
So that's something everyone can try. This is not something that's hugely difficult, that only sages can experience. This is something for everyone.
Right. Well, it's sort of like it's activating uh, the understanding. It's bringing the understanding, and I know that Rupert, Francis, and they don't like to use the word practice, but in this way, it's like exercising a new understanding. So it takes the place of what what the residual habit has been sort of acting acting
Yeah,
out.
yes. In a way, you could think of it as creating a new habit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One that supports these ideas, one that supports
Yes.
the obvious experience of your true nature, and not supporting the ignorance of the substitute self.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. He says that the state of meditation, when he after he speaks about the clay, and I felt like the clay idea, consciousness is like a ball of clay, at one moment taking the shape of the body, then just clay again, and then taking the shape of a dream. The clay itself is pure silence.
Yes.
The clay is just is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he says in the third paragraph down on page 148, the state of meditation means that objects. So he was talking about meditation. We find the same state of meditation is present when we wake up, and this is what you were referring to, and as a practice initially that becomes. And I felt that was very interesting that that the idea is practice before we go to bed at night. It's practice to establish this experience, and then it's a carryover into the morning wake up state. That
Yes.
meditation is a carryover experience.
Yes. Yes. Mm.
It's almost like a set point that is placed in the on the body mind experience for the mind that knows itself to be present and what it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. He says the state of meditation means that objects are present, but we are not hypnotized by them. If we knowingly dehypnotize ourselves from objects when going off to sleep, so we're dehypnotizing ourselves, we find that we are still free from them when we wake up. And I think this is an important idea to undertake. If anyone here feels like doing that, I think it would be helpful. I try to do this in the evenings. Just I think I use the idea of short moments many times. Short moments of just being aware of being aware is almost a set point for myself before the body mind goes off to sleep.
Yes, and as you say, it is something we can also try during the day whenever we're invited. He talks about being invited, so we don't do things necessarily as a practice, but
Yes.
we when we're invited, then we just enjoy sinking back into our true nature, what we really are.
Yeah. So what does the invitation look like to you?
It's it's just a sudden it's a sudden impulse for it, if I've been engaged in activity, could be anything, could be writing emails or something. There is a sudden impulse to just sink back below the objects of mind, body, and world, and I just follow that impulse, and it just arises spontaneously. But for me, I regard the whole of life as being meditation, because even when I'm writing the emails and focusing on whatever task needs to be focused on, that's still meditation, because I haven't lost the understanding of what I really am. So it's only when something arises which suddenly causes a contraction into a separate self, and I fall off the surfboard into the water, that that I'm out of meditation. And I look at it that way now. I think when you very first come to this teaching, it's kind of the other way around. You're always feeling yourself to be separate, or certainly I did initially, and then it was just occasional moments of invitation when you would sink back and you would not feel separate. But then the whole thing, at some point, the whole thing reverses.
Yeah, it's amazing how that happens. It's almost like you're describing, and Francis is describing a little bit of a progressive unfoldment that becomes self-knowing.
Yes, it's progressive when it's looked at from the point of view of time. When it's looked at from the point of view of consciousness, then it's not really
Right.
progressive,
Exactly.
because there's always um, in that understanding of what we are, there's at the same time an understanding that we've never been away from that,
Right.
that we've never ever been a separate entity. It comes with both. In other words,
Yeah.
it comes with an abandonment of a history of a separate entity.
Yeah. Yeah. It comes with with a knowing that we've always been, that we're always this.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah. There's a question I want to look at, or at least it's a very short. It says, "Is the observer the same as the I thought?" I want to get to that in a minute, but first, I didn't realize we had a few comments on the chat, and thank you for that, Monique, for your comments, and also Rick, and I think Andrea had one here too, and just a, a statement that Andrea made is it like being completely open to whatever comes? We're talking about welcoming, in because these chats were in the early part of our broadcast.
Absolutely, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And then Monique, about this welcoming, would you agree welcoming is accepting as it is? You love it, but you don't have to like it. I don't know about the last part.
Well, yeah, I think I know what she's getting at here, but correct me if I'm wrong, Monique. I think we welcome everything because we recognize that it is what is happening in consciousness right now. It is what we are. Whatever is happening is what we are. But at the same time, taking the perspective of a human body mind, and that doesn't mean to say that we believe that we are a human body mind, but taking the perspective of a human body mind, we might well not like it if we are watching cruelty to a human or an animal or whatever, or even sort of disrespect to an object of art. For example, it's perfectly natural not to like that, but at the same time we welcome it because we recognize it as occurring in what we are. It is what is happening. There's nothing not to welcome. There's no point in resisting it.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of where the mechanism. I think the mechanism, uh, it's no longer necessary because you're having the direct experience.
Yes, yes.
So the question. Oh no, there's another question in the chat. Where's my chat gone? I seem to have lost my board. Oh, there it is. The there's a question or a statement from Rick. Once really understood, the mind, the me, has no choice but to surrender or come to accept its own limitations. Real surrendering, which is beyond the mind. If there is such a thing as advanced spirituality, I would suggest that this chapter is it. Yeah, I would say it is. It definitely is because it does put. I mean, this is a no holds barred chapter because it brings you deeply into the introspection of what we all contemplate as we're awakening with this understanding.
Yes,
That
yes.
would be my that would be my take on it. The question, let's see, did I get any? Okay, so the bell rung. Thanks for the answer. You're welcome. The questioner has, is the observer the same as the I thought? Is the observer the same as the I thought? Now, I like to answer these questions before I read Francis's answer. And I got 2 for 2 on this, the next 2 questions. This one, yes, it is the thought that limits what we are to a specific entity that has the capacity to observe. The ego is created by the desire to observe. So I think that's a really important, potent statement that Francis says right there. The ego is created by the desire to observe. So that should be a little bit of a clue. Oh, there's a desire to observe here, or there's a watcher, right?
Yes, yes. And he says, in fact, it is the desire to observe. I think it can be many things. If the desire to observe is there, then that is ego. That if the desire to aggrandize oneself, to improve one's image is there, then that also is ego. So it's almost any desire that revolves around the idea of a separate entity is going to be ego.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea that there is an effort is an identifier also.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So the next question is it better to be in the I feeling than to follow the desire?
Yes, and I think that refers back to his answer to that previous question. The ego is the desire to observe. But he says something interesting, because he explains that the pure I feeling can't maintain itself. It's unstable. And one of two things happens. Either it attracts an attribute or a limitation, and those are things like I am a man, I am an accountant, I am happy, I'm sad, I'm hungry, all of those things. Or else the other possibility is that it just dies and it goes back to its source, which is pure consciousness. And he says, look at your own thoughts and feelings. You can either go back to the I thought around which they hinge, and from here you will be led to its source, which is this welcoming space of consciousness. Or if this space is deemed insufficient, the I thought will arise again and generate agitation, desires, and attributes.
Well, he definitely does explain in this chapter how the mechanism works.
Yes.
He definitely gives us really clear roadmap of how the mechanism works. And then he goes on. There's another. I don't see any questions in the chat. And if anyone has any questions, just use the raise your hand function if you would. The next question is, if we go from a thought or feeling back to the I around which they revolve, how do we go upstream to the source from there?
Yes, yes, and that's equivalent to what Rupert talks about when he says, trace your way back to what you really are. And the solution is the same. Francis says we just ask ourselves the question, are we the I thought or I feeling, or the consciousness in which the I thought or the I feeling appears? And it's obvious that we are that in which the I thought or the I feeling appears. We call it consciousness. And having seen that, we can either remain knowingly as that, or we can continue to identify as an object, as a limited I.
Yeah. I mean, Rupert uses language like on whose behalf is this appearing?
Yes, yes.
That's a
So
common,
that's the first step, and we say, well, then that's on behalf of I, and so let's now go to the I thought, or maybe it's an I feeling, and ask about that, and then next step is saying, asking the question that Francis
right, right.
asks. Yeah, so it's it can be as you say, it can be a 3-step process. In other words, particularly if some uncomfortable feeling is arising, if there's a feeling of disappointment, or anger or something like that, and then we say first, who, what is the I around that, around which this feeling revolves, and then, well, it's the thought of I, it's the feeling of I, and we go to that place in ourselves, and then we look from there to the consciousness in which that I thought or I feeling appears.
Yeah. He gave a really great statement here in the second paragraph down from that question when he says, to begin with, as we abide knowingly. And I think that's an important distinction also, as we abide knowingly. And I use resting as awareness, abiding knowingly, as this welcoming space. We will find ourselves being dragged back to the thought or feeling of being a limited I out of habit. However, the more often we gently return to this welcoming space and remain there in open unknowing, the more natural and easy it will become to remain there, to remain as it. And I felt that this was, the way he couched this was a little bit different, where he's really giving descriptive descriptive ideas of being gentle, being abidingly, we abide knowingly in this welcoming space. So he's giving us some sort of a way to, almost like a portal to as that experience.
Yes, because we have got this this habit, which we've practiced over decades, of feeling ourselves to be separate. So it takes a while for that habit to dissolve. And so what he's suggesting here is really creating that new habit of abiding as what we really are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Francis, for giving us such a descriptive chapter here. And we still have about 15 minutes left. I'm not closing, but I wanted to mention to everyone that I have a thought that I'd like to invite Francis to come back again and join us in the next couple of weeks, or maybe next month. Invite him to come back. I would love it if you would formulate any questions for Francis, and you could email it to one of us, billfreeonline@gmail.com, if you have a question for Francis. And if we get 3 or 4 questions, I would take the time to contact Francis and say, we'd like to have you come back around chapter 12 or so. If that's something that is of interest to all of you, and you also, Jenny, I would love to do that. And if you would put your email for folks to send the email to you too, that would be great. And just thought I would throw that in. That just came from out of nowhere. I just think that would be we're more than the halfway point here. It would be nice to have Francis come back and visit us, and I think he will. As we look at the next page, on page 150, this is where I got the idea that this was, this next paragraph at the top of the page starts with however. There is no need to take the I thought again and again. This gave me a feeling that it was almost like a progressive path description, where he says it becomes boring if we do. We take the I thought once and it leads us to this welcoming presence which we are. Then we remain in this presence in the now and face all the contractions, the avoidance, the attraction, the repulsion, the stuff. Gradually, as we face this stuff as it comes up, it loses its connection with the I, which no longer identified with an object, merges with the source and is realized as consciousness. And this gave me an idea that it's not really progressive, but it uses it uses a almost a letting go and a moving into as what he's calling gradual, as it merges.
Yes, there was a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, there was a lovely answer he gave on a satsang, and someone was talking about when they had uncomfortable feelings. I think I mentioned this last time, and he said, "We'll have all that's needed is a 2-second meditation. You just come back to your understanding of your true nature. That's all that's needed. You don't need to do this big meditation thing. You just come back. Takes no more than 2 seconds. In fact, it eventually doesn't even take that. It's automatic."
Yeah.
Whereas the difference is that on a progressive path, then you would be meditating for half an hour twice a day, for example.
Yeah.
And that would be a practice which you would do from discipline.
Yeah. I think that's the idea, or I think that's the intention that is given to, even in the Course in Miracles. I think that's the intention of the idea, the holy instant. I think it's an idea that there is an instant, or a half an instant, or a quarter of an instant. There's this. I don't even want to use the word moment, mostly because of Rupert saying that moment isn't even correct. So there's this instant of recognition that transcends time, that transcends the body-mind experience.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I love the sentence right at the end of that answer. We no longer feel that we need to be entertained. I think that's beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And very accurate too, because we're no
Yes.
longer, it's really not necessary. The next question is, and I think this will probably be the last question. So would you say that it's more important to let the I go in the course of our daily lives or in meditation?
I thought that was quite a weird question, and he explains that there's actually no difference.
Yes.
That if we regard meditation as something we do, then that's not real meditation. We might set aside time to sit quietly and contemplate, but not as a practice, only if we're invited. And he explains that if we do that, then we get reminders during the day. And there's this lovely thing he says, that the moment in which a reminder comes to us is very creative. We just live with it, let it flow through us. Sometimes it is a thought thinking about the truth. Sometimes it's more like a feeling being invited by meditation. If we make a special time for meditation in order to go towards a goal, then there is some rigidity, some discipline. But if we make time for it out of love, without a goal, without a notion that it will take us nearer the mark, that's fine.
Yeah, that's what you were saying a few minutes ago about
Yes.
spontaneity, and it sort of flips.
Yes.
It flips into the experience of what this chapter talks about, just moving into the flow.
Yes, it's an effortless life. Things happen. The body engages with things. There's no separation between the body and the world. They're not two separate realms. They are one. So what is happening is happening, whether the body is participating in it or not. There's nothing doing it. There's nothing choosing it. It's just all happening, and it's very relaxed. So whatever needs to happen happens, and the times when we feel agitation, feel, oh, I must get such and such done. Then you just look at that and okay, this has got to the top of the mental list of things that need doing. I'll allow the body to do it. The body does it, and that's fine. And there's no heaviness about it. No heaviness and no stickiness.
Yeah, yeah. It's also it's really a space that invites uh, total peace about whatever's happening.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
just it's very interesting to find this. I would say Francis is describing he's describing the goalless goal.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to mention before we leave, I'm gonna put a link in here for I'm doing a Facebook Live with Rupert on Friday at 12 Eastern. If you want to save that link in your browser, we're going to do a 30-minute. I'm going to interview him about his newest meditation book, I Am. It's that pocket-sized book that his wife Ellen had a little Facebook snapshot of it. My wife copied it and put it on Facebook. It's a small little meditation book that he offered, and Jenny has did it. She has some background information about this, the way this poem that's in this book, I Am, came about. She interviewed Rupert. When did you do that, Jenny?
Oh, that was over a year ago. No, it was just before the lockdown, the COVID lockdown. In fact, I went to his house. I actually saw all of his pots, and I was explaining earlier to Bill that the reason he wrote this poem was that in his career as a potter, he was moving towards writing poems on pots. I've got a little jug which has part of a poem from Kathleen Raine on it, for example. But then he thought, well, I'd like to have one of my own poems expressing the non-dual understanding on my pots, and so that was the origin uh, for that meditation book. Really,
Yeah.
it was a poem that he wrote, and he put parts of it on a number of his larger pieces.
Yeah, I felt that was a very interesting the way that sort of evolved. And then also, as I've been reading the poem, uh, it takes you immediately to the self. When you read those poems, it's speaking from I am. Just directly. It just feels so powerful. And I can see why he calls it I am, because the entire poem, it must be 100 pages, small pages. I mean, it's not there. 100 must be 100 poems, so close to 80 or so, 80 to 100 poems, and they really are speaking about that presence, that I am, but not about it. It's almost like from it.
Yes, I'm just going to put a link on the message board to. Um,
And there was a question from Barbara, what day and time? It's Friday at 12 Eastern. If you go to that link, it's the Course in Miracles. I invited him to the Course in Miracles group because it's over 400,000 people in that group, and I thought that would be a great introduction, is try to bring Rupert to an audience that isn't the choir as often as possible, because I think these ideas are so important. So he agreed that that would be a good venue. So we're going to do a little 20, probably 30 minutes Facebook Live, and he'll be talking about this new book that just came out in the UK today, or this week, I think. I think it just became available in the UK, or at least is being promoted that way. And then,
yes, I think it is available in the UK now.
yeah, I think that just
Mm,
happened.
mm.
And then so we're gonna be talking about that. And I don't know if we're gonna talk about the book study, but we'll probably touch on that. We're going to be having this book study with Rupert's book, his next book called Being Myself, that will be it will come out in October, and we're going to have start the book study in October. Rupert will be our first guest, and that'll be through his through Sahaja publication. So he'll be carrying all the information about the book study, and I'll be inviting some of you to be in rotation of that book study, and that book study will take place from October until April of next year. Let's see. Yes, Barbara says I got AM a month ago. Wow, it is so beautiful. Oh, you did. Oh, yeah, you got I am a month ago. Oh, good. Yeah, it is. When you sit with that book, it's meditative in its own right, in a way that is not trying to get somewhere. You just find yourself there.
Yes.
Yeah. So the next, we're going to end on page 151. The next question is, when I see that I am stuck to my body mind, this observation releases the stuckness, but I don't feel that I remain in my true nature, that I go, that I go all the, what is it?
Go all the way. I think I know what the question means. That the person doesn't feel they've sunk deep enough into what they truly are, and I think this comes from the fact there are so many stories published about dramatic enlightenment events that people expect some kind of a dramatic event, and if one isn't forthcoming, they assume they've got further to go. But in fact, there always is further to go, because there's always a possibility to deepen understanding and to learn how to live more completely in accordance with our understanding. What he says is just go as far as you can. What is essential is our goodwill to go all the way, no matter what. If we have this goodwill, then for all practical purposes, it is as good as if we have gone all the way. And that's very similar to what he was saying earlier about welcoming, wasn't it?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And I this is one of the things I love about Francis Lucille is that he really invites the gentle approach. He really invites, I mean, he's a, I don't want to use the word serious because I mean, he can be serious. I mean, when I first met him and invited him to conferences, he's like stone face. I need a question. If I don't have a question, I got nothing to say. But as soon as he starts answering, oh my God, it's like somebody opened the waterfall, and
Yes.
the truth abounds. But one of the things I noticed with his questioners is that he is a very gentle man and very gentle in his in offering solutions for ideas of stuckness.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah. He says, what is essential is our goodwill to go all the way, no matter what.
mm.
Yeah. And I would relate to above all else, you know, our desire to know the self becomes prominent.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there was a request from William Price. Thanks, William, for that suggestion. I will put the link to the Friday broadcast in the replay that will go out to everyone in the notification. I'll put the link right there so you don't have to look for it except for one place. And we'll do that. And I'll see you all on Friday, or we'll see you again on Tuesday. And don't forget to send your questions in. I'd love to see 3 or 4 questions to tell me that we're on track to invite Francis back, and we'll bring him back in 2 to 4 weeks. And we'll see you all next week. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Jenny, for being a great host. And we love you all. And we'll see you then.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.